Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Nancy Hart Battaglia, talking about my book, Blame It on the Full Moon. I'm delighted you're here with me today for another adventure. And today I thought I would talk about opportunities, careers, jobs, the path taken, the path not taken. And some of you may be trying to figure out what you want to do. Some of you may be wanting to make a change. It's not always an easy decision, but mine have all come unexpectedly. I only applied for 2 jobs out of the dozen jobs I've had in life. I only actually applied for 2 of them. The rest of them came from a phone call or from a chance meeting with somebody, something totally unexpected and out of the blue. And even the 2 that I applied for, one I didn't think I would get. I knew nothing about it, and I was young and inexperienced. And the second one, everybody wanted, and everybody, all my friends in graduate school, you'll never get a job there, Nancy. I was a good student, but I also like to enjoy life. And while they were all sitting there studying day and night, I was making A's. I think I had a 3.8 in graduate school, but I was out partying and going to fraternity parties and doing things with my Delta Gamma chapter and all. And so, they thought I was very frivolous, and I wanted to go work for the New York Public Library for my first job. And they're like, "You'll never get it. You better look around some." Surprise, surprise. I manifested it, and that's a secret you can learn too, is manifesting. I started out as a music major. I loved music. When I was about 3 years old, we were in New Orleans. For some unknown reason, I have no recollection why, I begged my parents to get us a piano and for me to have lessons. And they bought one. Well, Mother played, and she liked to sing and play. And my father loved hearing it and enjoyed music. So they bought a Steinway Spinet in New Orleans. Not too long after that, my father gets transferred to Kansas City, Missouri, where we were to live for 13 years in that area. So we get the Spinet. We head to Kansas City. And I guess I'm about 5 when they find a really good music teacher, Alma Yardley, for me. There's a hall named Yardley Hall for her in a community college on the south side of Kansas City. I think it's on the Kansas side, but she earned enough as a teacher. She gave them $1 million to build a concert hall, and it's named after her. She was a wonderful teacher. So I'm studying piano for like 5 to almost 17 when we left. And I'm studying the violin for about 8 or 9 years in there. I played in the All-City Orchestra in Kansas City, Kansas, and the high school orchestra at Southwest High. So music is my love. And I was playing Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Bach and Bela Bartok and what have you. I was Chopin. I was good enough that my piano teacher and my violin teacher thought I would probably go to Curtis or Juilliard back east to study music when I graduated from high school. Wrong. Life took one of those unexpected turns, and right before my senior year of high school, my father gets transferred to the San Francisco office of the U.S. Public Health Service, where he was a commissioned officer. And I'm like, no. And he and the head doctor, he was the head engineer and the head doctor, both got transferred. Bob Blankenship was the son of the doctor, and he and I were classmates. He got to stay. I had to go. I thought that was so unfair. I've grown up in Kansas City, 13 years there, kindergarten up through junior year, and now I have to leave. But it was to change my life in ways I never expected. So off we go to California. I'll tell you more about that later, because today we're talking about career paths and choices and how you get there and the unexpected. So off we go to California. My advisor there at Hillsdale High in San Mateo found out about my love of music and said, "You should go to Mills College in Oakland. It's famous for music. Darius Milhaud, this great French composer and musician, was there every other year. And he was such an influence. Mills College was a women's college. It had 650 women when I was there, and it had an excellent reputation. It was considered the Smith of the West Coast. On the East Coast, you had Smith, Wellesley, Vassar, Radcliffe. In California, you had Mills, and that's where the West Coast people went. Ingrid Bergman's daughter, Jenny Lindstrom, was in my dorm at Mary Boers Hall. So, and James Cagney's daughter was at Mills at that time, and Chiang Kai-shek's granddaughter. So it was a very prestigious school and an excellent reputation, especially in music. And Dave Brubeck got a master's there under Darius Milhaud. Men could not go there or live on campus, but they could take graduate courses there. And that's where he learned his type of rhythm and syncopation and all, was from Darius Milhaud. And I later found out just recently that Burt Bacharach, who wrote all of those wonderful songs, What's It All About, Alfie, and what have you, he also studied under Milhaud, but back in New York City. So Milhaud had an influence on two of the most noted musicians, songwriters, and composers all of our time, Dave Brubeck and Burt Bacharach. And I had good grades, and I did well on test scores and all, so Mills was very strict. I mean, you had to really have good grades and all to go there, and I managed to get in. Unfortunately, Dr. Ruth Lyons, who was head of the music department, for some reason took a dislike to me. Those of you who know me now and are watching me here today cannot imagine I was ever quiet and shy, but I was. And at college, I was totally intimidated by being away from home for the first time and just the whole experience. So I did not volunteer in class. I mean, if you called on me, I could usually answer it correctly, but I wasn't like waving my hand, here I am, I've got the answer. And she gave me a D like David. And I'm like, Dr. Lyons, why? And she said, I've got A's and B's on all my papers. Today, this would be a lawsuit. But she said, you never spoke up in class, and that's 50% of your grade. I'm like, 50%? But I answered when you called on me. But you didn't volunteer, and I wanted you to speak up. So I thought, this woman is never going to like me. I could just sense there was some kind of built-in animosity. Now I know about past lives. It probably was some past life connection. It had nothing to do with this life, but anyway. In the meantime, I had been quite ill those first 2 years. I got the mumps the first year, and it went into spinal meningitis, so I missed a couple of weeks of school. One of those 2 Christmases, I had impact and wisdom teeth and looked like a chipmunk with those dug out for the whole Christmas holiday. And at the end of my sophomore year, there was a big strep or staph infection going around. It killed about 120 people. And I got it I don't know how. Nobody else on the campus had it. I had it, and they called my parents and said, you have to get an ambulance and take her to a hospital. One case is an epidemic on this campus. We can't keep her here. So I spent a week in the hospital recovering from that, which meant taking all of my finals about 2 months later that summer. And of course, I had forgotten half the stuff by then. But anyway, so I felt really, I love Mills, and I love the wonderful friends I made there. I've kept friends with a lot of the women through the years. I go back for the reunions, but I didn't want to stay. Well, first of all, you had to declare a major, and mine had been music, and now I'm without a major, and it's my junior year, and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. There's a big world out there. My mother said that she saw, while I'm home that summer, that she saw an ad in the paper for a library assistant with the San Mateo Public Library. The joke of this was I did not know how to use a library. My father would pick up books for me in high school on the way home from the library. At school and college, I was very good at filing and painting nails and doing manicures for people, and I would barter that for, remember that, people, you might have a skill you can barter sometime. I would barter that for somebody stop at the library for me and get the books I needed. I'll do your nails if you'll go get these books. I had no clue. And the university system, it turns out, has a different system of lettering and numbering. They have their own system. So it wasn't going to be like a public library anyway. So I thought, well, I'll go take, you had to take an exam. It was about a 4-hour exam to apply for this. And I get there, and they're like 35 to 40 people, including retired school teachers and what have you. And I'm like, I'm never going to get this job. how about thinking positive, right? I'm never going to get this job. I had not learned about the power of positive thinking at that point. But anyway, I took the test, which required uh, giving definitions of words and spelling and matching up authors and titles and then telling who wrote what things and asking what certain authors wrote and figuring out the Dewey Decimal System, and I can't remember what all, but it was a 3 or 4 hour exercise here of understanding libraries. And then there was a section with paragraphs where you would be helping a patron, and some irate patron comes in and slams down the books and starts yelling at you in the library. And how do you handle that? You're dealing with one, and this other is pushing them aside, and you had to write paragraphs explaining this. But I somehow got through it, and to my shock and surprise, I was in the top 3 finalists. Well, I had taken a lot of English lit classes, and so I guess and I had good language skills, and so I guess that's what got me through. But anyway, then the top 3 of us had to go be interviewed by the head of city personnel, Robert Kopic, and the head of the department that this person at the library would be working in, which was the circulation department. So 3 of us go down there. I'm scared to death. I'm 19. I hadn't had to interview for anything like this in my life. And I end up in the top 2 candidates. So we had to go be interviewed by the city librarian. I can still remember having an avocado green linen suit on with a box jacket and a pale yellow linen blouse and dark brown pumps. And my knees were quaking with these interviews. I'm like, this is scary. Worse in college. But anyway, I get the job. And I turned out loving it. I'd had French and German, and so I could help with language issues. And there were a lot of people who came in and wanted to know something about a French author or this or that. So I got to get to do some reference work, which I enjoyed. And I found out I really loved working in a library. So the next path would be to go back and get a master's in library science so I could have a real job as a real librarian. I mean, I had a real job, but I was at the bottom of the totem pole. I wanted to be at the top of the food chain. So I decided, I applied and got accepted at Berkeley and different library schools where they had, well, no, first I had to go get an undergraduate degree. So I wanted to get out of state. I could go to Berkeley. I did apply to Berkeley and several other schools, and I could have gone to UCLA or whatever. But I made a decision to go back to Kentucky. And now people think this is crazy. Why would anybody, the Californians thought it was crazy at least, why would anybody leave the Golden State, which was a great state back then, and go clear across country to Kentucky? What's in Kentucky anyway? Coal mines in the hills in the eastern part. But I said, I'm going back because I love horses, bluegrass, and basketball. And the University of Kentucky had the top basketball team then, and Lexington was surrounded with bluegrass and horse farms. And you could go watch the horses race. I loved it. So off to Kentucky I go. And there I do my first manifesting of something I really wanted. Now, this is years before Esther and Jerry Hicks wrote The Laws of Attraction, and how if you sit down, if you believe it and can visualize it, you can create it. It's not seen as believing, it's believing is seen. So I wanted to be a Delta Gamma and the Delta Gamma sorority. My best friends from Kansas City were DGs at the University of Kansas or different schools. Some of my high school sorority sisters were. I wanted to be a Delta Gamma. And I said, okay, God. I've always talked to God. God and I have a direct connection, and each of you do too. You can each go directly to the source because the source lives within each of us. So we are the source. We're the personification of the source, that little spark that came down from heaven and landed in this body. So I would talk to God, and I said, I know that the sororities are limited on how many bids they can give out. Don't waste any of the ones I don't want on me. All I want is Delta Gamma. What happens? I get one bid, Delta Gamma, and I'm like, yay! I loved it. I ended up the vice president and head of the standards board for the chapter. I served as an alumni advisor for Rush at the Florida State chapter when I went there to graduate school, and I'm still active with my alumni chapter. I love Delta Gamma. They're wonderful people, and I met several of them in Washington when I worked for President Reagan. And when I worked at CNN, the two anchors I worked for, Chris Curl, she was a DG from the Berkeley chapter. So DGs kept floating in and out of my life along the way. And so I go back and get my degree, and then my sister and I take off for Europe for 3 whole months. We just wanted to play and relax. We had no itinerary. We didn't have the first reservation once we got to Europe. All we had was our ticket over on an Italian ship that was full of students. That's all that were on it, 1,200 students. And we had the best time. So we're going, it's called the Aurelia. So we're going over on the Aurelia. We meet a girl on the ship, and we shared a room with her. And she had a reservation in London at some person's home that was renting out rooms. So we stayed there. And I learned in London, it was cold and damp at that time, that you had to put those coins in like every hour to keep the heater going or you'd freeze. So all night long you're getting up and feeding the heater machine. But anyway, we had our traveler's checks and way too many suitcases, and they were not on rollers back then. So that was our trip to Europe. But we come back, and I had applied to a lot of colleges with graduate schools. There were 33 of them back then. And one of them was Florida State. One was Michigan, where my parents went. One was Columbia in New York, and one was Berkeley. And I got accepted at all of them. So my father is waiting for us when we come home. And we stayed a little longer. We were having so much fun in Europe. We stayed a little longer than we were supposed to. And my father said, yeah, all of these colleges are calling us saying, is Nancy coming or not? And they all start in about 3 or 4 days. What are you doing? And it was cold at the end of the summer. It was rainy and damp in Paris and Denmark and all. So my smart decision, am I comparing the schools, the reputations, the best opportunities afterwards? No. I say, where is the warmest place that accepted me? And Daddy said Florida State. And I said, that's where we're headed. And my sister flew on home. He met us in Cincinnati. My sister flew home to California, and my father and I go to Lexington, get out my car and all my belongings. I had little chest of drawers and stuff, and we get a little trailer, and off we go to Tallahassee. Now, I don't have a place to stay, and that's very hard to find, even back then. I mean, I'm not prepared at all to go to Tallahassee, but fate, my angels, I don't know how all of this works. I know how the results, but I can't tell you how it's all put together. But I had been active in women's government on the campus at the University of Kentucky, and I knew the Dean of Women quite well. And she had been at a conference of other deans of women's from colleges around the country, and got to talking, and somehow she knew where I was thinking of going, and she's talking to the dean at Florida State, the Dean of Women. And they needed some graduate students to be house mothers for off-campus houses. So my father said, they're offering you this position. You will live in a house and you'll be responsible for these girls. I'm like, oh, great. I've just come from being that age, being an undergraduate and all. I know what that can be like. But he said, you will have free place to stay. You won't have to pay for where you're staying for the whole year. And they're going to give you some money on top of it, which was enough to pay for food and gas for my car, I found out. So this was perfect. How perfect could it be? So we get to Florida State, and it turned out Dean Oglesby, who was Dean of Students, was a good friend of one of my father's best friends, the man who went to California with my father, and his son got to stay and graduate while I didn't in Kansas City. But anyway, so I was welcomed down there with people already, and the Dean of Women and the Dean of Students is saying, anything I can do to help you and all. And it turned out I had, I think 6 girls in this house. There were 2 houses with a fence between them, and the gate was locked. So they had to go through the door of the house next door to come in. This way we could keep control of people trying to sneak in and out. Although one of them did try to sneak out in the middle of the night and elope with her boyfriend who'd come up from Miami. So but I was 2 steps ahead of them. And I only weighed about 105 pounds. I was 5'3", 105 pounds. I've always looked a little younger than I am, luckily. And so I could hear the people who owned the house were in the other room meeting the girls and settling them, telling them who's in which room and all. And they said, by the way, you've met Nancy Hart. She's unpacking, but she'll be here in a minute. And she's going to be your house mother. And one of them said, that little girl in there, and the others chimed in. She's going to be our house mother. So I pulled myself up to my 5'3" and marched into the room and said, girls, whatever you're going to try and do, don't, because I've already tried it before you. I just graduated. I've been an undergraduate student, and if you think you're going to sneak out or get into trouble or whatever, I'm 2 steps ahead of you. Don't even think about it. And I ended up being good friends with them, and one of them came to visit me in New York later, and one of them I went home with for one of the holidays to stay with her family in Leesburg and all. So it worked out fine, and we got along great. But they just couldn't believe that I was going to be their house mother. But I think I did a good job of it. The only little hitch in the whole operation was the neighbors resented having college students living there. We had no parties. I mean, boys were not allowed to come past the front door to pick somebody up of the one house where you had a door you could get in and out of. And so, but they sued us. They took the owners and those of us who were there as the house mothers, they sued us and took us to court and said we were running a house of prostitution, a red light house, which could not have been farther from the truth. Everybody studied hard. Boys were not allowed in, but we had to go testify. Thank goodness the deans, I had these 2 deans on my side. I said, I can't believe that we're being accused of that. And they said, well, we know that there's nothing going on, and you keep strict tabs on those houses, and so we're right behind you. And it's just that they don't like having that going on in their neighborhood, having girls living there. And there weren't a lot of cars coming up. I mean, girls would have a date and all, but if they would pick them up and leave, so we weren't crowding the street with cars or anything. So that anyway, while there at Florida State, it was a 3-semester program. We would graduate in August. Recruiters were still coming around recruiting in those days for jobs for different corporations and all, including the library world. And I said, I'm going to work at the New York Public Library. And all of my classmates said, Nancy, you're never going to get a job with the New York Public Library. You'd better interview with somebody else just in case, or you'll be without a job when we graduate. And I said, I have to live in New York. I fell in love with it on my way to Europe, but I'll compromise. I'll also interview with Brooklyn and Queens. They each have a public library system. It gets me in the area. And just in case, I'll do Enoch Pratt in Baltimore, which was also a wonderful library. Little did I know back then, I hadn't done any family history or whatever. Little did I know my family at one time owned 1,200 acres of downtown prime Baltimore land, and were a church that one of them, my 5 greats grandfather built. The old Otterbein Church is there right across from Camden Yards, the baseball stadium, and it's on the National Historic Register and all. So it could have been fun living in Baltimore if I'd known I had family history, but I didn't. So the recruiters came around in January, and this lovely man from the New York Library interviewed me. And he said, if you make your grades, which I did, and graduate in August, which I did, there is a job waiting for you at the New York Public Library. And my classmates were astounded. And so I spent a year in New York, some of which was wonderful, some of which was challenging. The story about the stalker and the story about the folk singers I ran around with and all that will have to wait for another episode. I just wanted you to know that, life can be unexpected and uncertain. I did plan to go to Kentucky, not until I knew I was not going to be at Mills, but I did plan that. But Mills was an unexpected thing in my life. Going to Florida State was unexpected. And the second thing I manifested after manifesting being a Delta Gamma was a job with the New York Public Library. I really wanted to be there. And if you want to visualize something, just picture yourself going up and down the steps of the library, or whatever it is you want. Picture yourself there, doing things there. And I did. I would see that. And I guess I have a very active imagination. I guess it's easy for me to visualize those things. So I will leave you till our next visit together. And maybe this gets you thinking about some things. And, if you let it. Somebody said in a TV program I was watching recently, it was a Hallmark movie, and they said, you can either chase after life or you can let life come to you. I let life come to me. I chased after fun and music and dancing and travel and good times, but I let jobs and where I lived and the larger picture, I let that come to me. In every one of my jobs, you'll see as we go through this journey together, they came through a phone call or a person I met unexpectedly. I did not even know. I don't think I knew any of these jobs existed, and until they came to me. So, but I had faith in God. I had faith in myself. I had faith in my talents and abilities, and I just knew I wanted to have a good, wonderful life. But I didn't define it. Growing up in the 50s, like I did, we used to laugh about girls going to college for an MRS degree. In other words, put that Mrs. before your name and change your last name. I wish I'd kept Hart the whole time, because I've had several different major career directions, and part of that was under Kiever, part Hart for the first 35 years, and now Battaglia. So that's why I do Nancy Hart Battaglia. People knew me as that until I was 35 and got married the first time. But it's think about what you want and then see it happening. Like it's your movie. We're each in our own movie, and you're the star. You're also the director. You're the producer, and you're the set designer. You design how it's going on around you. So think about what you want. And a lot of people do vision boards now, where you get a great big piece of cardboard and you cut out pictures that of the city you want to go to, or the job, or whatever it is you want. And I will say that even though I didn't follow music as a career, I still love music. I look for music everywhere. My passions in life are music, dancing, travel, my kitty cats, jewelry. I love rings. You'll notice I have different rings on. With this ring really talked to me. It's a tanzanite I found out in a little town in Nevada, and it said you'd have to take me home. And this one I found in Palm Springs. But I love jewelry. I love rings and earrings especially. I love shoes. I've got as many as Imelda Marcos, I think. And I love hats, which I used to wear a lot and don't. And I will always be trying to find the music in life. So there you have it. Have a wonderful month of July, and I look forward to being with you again. Thank you for being here today. Bye.